let us move further and discuss about the time of supply of goods and time of supply of services. Now, my dear friend, in case of a time of supply of goods, meaning thereby, in case I am selling the goods, when my liability will be there to pay the GST. So, my dear friend, the section which deal with this is the section 12 has been given, that we are going to discuss now the section 12, which says the time of supply of goods, meaning thereby when my liability will accrue. Please note down this point, the accrue, meaning thereby I am liable to pay the tax, will be or shall be the earlier of the following. Now, when this law was introduced, it was the date of invoice or the last date on which he is required to issue the invoice. Meaning thereby, please note down. Say, for example, I raised the invoice on 13th of August. So when my liability will accrue, it will be on the 13th of August. But say, for example, if I will say that my liability to pay the GST will accrue on the date of invoice. So somebody will say, okay, let me cheat the government. And even if I supplied the goods on the 9th of August, I supplied the goods on the 9th of August, and deliberately I raised the invoice on the, for example, the 2nd of September. So what will happen? As per this date, my liability to pay the tax will be on the 20th of September. But if I will go with this date, my liability to pay will become 20th of October. So I will take the benefit of the wrong benefit of 1 month to postpone my liability. So now, if the situation should not emerge like this, just to handle this situation, the government introduced the concept called that the date of invoice or the last date on which he is required to raise the invoice, meaning thereby when it was supposed to raise the invoice. So now, when one has to raise the invoice is there under section 31, but let us make it very simple, that you have to raise the invoice on the same day when you are removing the goods. So my dear friend, in case I am removing the goods on the 9th of August, I am supposed to raise the invoice on the 9th of August only. Even if I will raise the invoice on the 2nd of September, my liability will be based on this. It is wrong. They can impose the penalty on me because there will be a movement of goods without invoice. So even there will be a penalty of 100% in case I will do so like this under various section of the GST. So now the law says that when you raise the invoice or when you supposed to raise the invoice. So when I supposed to raise the invoice, as I mentioned you, on the removal or disposal of the goods, or when you are handing over the goods to somebody, to the buyer, as given under section 31. So my dear friend, practically speaking, in a layman way, that it will be that when I am supposed to raise the invoice or I raise the invoice, my liability to pay the GST will accrue. Now, my dear friend, as I given you that when I once should raise the invoice as being given on the removal of goods, where the supply involved movement of goods, meaning thereby when you are removing the goods, say for example, I went to Panipat to buy the bed sheets. Now, the moment I started from there, okay, the supplier has to raise the invoice on the moment of the start as being given the removal of goods, or in case the removal is not there. For example, I am purchasing a factory. It's immovable. So when the delivery of this factory is being handed over to me, when the keys will be handed over to me, one has to raise the invoice. So as being given in the rule section 31, that one has to raise the invoice either on a removal or the delivery. Now, my dear friend, I mentioned you the earlier of the following. We have discussed one aspect, that the date of invoice, and the another aspect which was there earlier was the date on which the supplier received the payment, meaning thereby the payment. So earlier it was invoice or payment, whichever is earlier. Whichever is earlier. This was the law. But my dear friend, after the introduction of the GST and when there was a representation from the various trade or the bodies, this word payment has been removed. Meaning thereby the payment means the advance payment. Why I am saying the payment means advance payment? Because if the payment is being received later on, so say for example, let us take an example. The invoice was received on the 9th of August 2022. The payment was received, let us say in the first case, the payment was received on the 28th of July. And in the second case, the payment was received on the 28th of August. Now, my dear, in the first case, because the law has been deleted, meaning thereby this date is immaterial. This is the date of the advance received. So this date is immaterial and the liability will accrue only on this date. The invoice or payment, whichever is earlier, is now no more there. And in case the second case is there, for example, the payment is received on the 28th of August, hardly again immaterial because my liability already become accrued on the 9th of August, that is the date of invoice. So that's why they removed this clause that the payment is immaterial. Now, in the new law, it is only the date of invoice. Or I should have raised the invoice. So only that actually is the date of invoice which is material when your liability of the GST will accrue, in this case 9th of August. So my dear friend, when we are discussing about this section 12 and we are doing a supply of goods, so when my liability to pay the GST will accrue, it will be on the date of invoice. Payment hardly matters. But the only check which we have to see that when I'm saying date of invoice, meaning thereby that you should raise the invoice. You should raise the invoice on the day which you should have raised. It should not be that you are postponing your invoice and they then say, okay, sir, you have mentioned the date of invoice. I have not raised the invoice, so I will pay whenever I will raise the invoice. No. You are supposed to raise the invoice on the movement of the goods, on the delivery or on the removal of the goods or delivery of the goods. So my dear friend, this was a case when you should pay your liability will accrue as per the time of supply provision. Now, my dear friend, there is another case. The proviso is there under the GST law, which says that in case of you are receiving certain amount in advance. You are receiving certain amount in advance. So in that case, what will happen? That you are receiving 1,000 rupees. Say, for example, you are getting, you raised the invoice of, say, 5,000 rupees, but actually you received 5,500 rupees. So you raised the invoice of 5,000 on the sale 9th of August, but you actually received the 5,500 rupees, that is 500 rupees extra because of the one or the other reason. So in that case, the law says that the time of supply of this 500 will be on the option of the supplier that whenever he wishes to raise the invoice, say for example, he want to raise the invoice on the day when he received this 500 rupees extra. For example, he received this on the 20th of November. Then for this 500 rupees, the time of supply will be 20th of November as per the choice of the supplier. My dear friend, if we move further and discuss the next aspect of the time of supply related to the goods, again, it will be related to the goods, but under the RCM. So say, for example, you are buying certain agriculture goods on the RCM which are applicable, meaning thereby a farmer is there. He is selling certain goods which are falling under the RCM to a Artiya. Now when he is selling these goods, selling goods to Artiya, which are falling under the RCM. So now the question will come, when the Artiya has to pay the tax to government. Say for example, he is selling 2 lakhs rupees and the rate is 5%. So when this 10,000 rupees has to be paid to the government by the Artiya is the question. So to answer this question, again, it will be the earliest of the following. You have to see the different events and see that which event will fall first. And based on that, you have to pay the tax to the government exchequer. Now, my dear friend, the first one is the date of receipt of the goods. Okay? Meaning thereby, let us take a date of, again, I will say the 9th of August. Is the day when the goods have been received. The second one is the date of payment as entered in the books of accounts of the recipient Artiya, or the date of which the payment is debited in book account, whichever is earlier. Now, my dear friend, he issued a check. Let us say he issued a check on the 12th of August. And he entered, so here, this is the date of check. He entered this transaction in the books of accounts on the 15th of August, whereas in the bank account, the check was clear on the 13th of August from the bank clearance. Now, my dear friend, which will be the day? The B. Now, first is 9th of August. Okay. Now, what will be the second? A or B, whichever is earlier, we have to see. Now, in this case, the date of check will not matter. It will be the earliest of these following two. So, A or B. Now, in this case, the bank got cleared this check on 13th of August. So, the next date will be 13th of August. So, now out of these two, we have to see whichever is earlier. And since in this case, the 9th August is clear, 9th August is the day. Okay. And now coming to the next one, the day immediately following 30 days from the date of issue of invoice or any other document by whatever name called in lieu thereof the supply. Meaning thereby the 30th day. Okay, the 30th day from the date of invoice. Now the goods were received on the 9th of August, but the invoice was dated, say for example, 2nd of August. The invoice was issued on the 2nd of August, goods dispatched, received on the 9th of August. So the third date is the 2nd of August, 2022 to 30 days. Meaning thereby 2nd of September. So this will be not the date. It will be 30 days from the date of invoice. So now I have the three dates. The date of receipt of the goods, the date when the check hit my bank, and the third one, the 30 days from the date of invoice, whichever is earlier. So now, my dear friend, out of this A, B, and C, you will agree with me that it will be the 9th of August when my liability to pay the tax under reverse charge will be applicable. And based on this date, I have to pay this tax on the 20th of September, 2022. That my liability to pay the tax will accrue on the 9th of August in this particular case. So, my dear friend, this is the way that we need to learn. It's very